So I'm here today with my friend Slava Rubin, who I check in with every once in a while to get a sense of what's going on in the alt world. And alt world for me is a whole lot of things. But Slava, I'm such a fan of you and your story for reasons beyond just you and your success. I think it's a testament to how the U.S. of A. is still an interesting place that people want to come to, and then when they do have the good fortune of getting here legally and applying their skills and their talents and getting educated like you did and have to make a real contribution to the things we are as a country. It just makes you proud that we're still that for so many people. So if we could just touch a little bit on your earlier story, what your career path would be. I'm sure you were with a whole bunch of other smart kids who were thinking of all different careers, but I would think then investment banking was still attractive. I know you went into consulting, which I think is a really pretty terrific thing for young people to do out of school, because now it just changes. Now you're learning, but now you're getting paid pretty well to learn. And you get a pretty good cross-section of all different kinds of business as a consultant. Was that the case?
Yeah, when I was growing up in the 80s, definitely there was Wall Street, the movie. Definitely investment banking was considered a pretty hot job where, you get a lot of power and money and control and all this stuff. I was attracted to some of that as a youth. I came to Wharton. I got a finance and entrepreneurial management dual degree. So I definitely always had an entrepreneurial instinct ever since I was a kid. We could double click on that if you'd like. But when I was starting to take some of those finance classes with the other folks in my class, I just felt a bit different. I'm like, I'm not really the same as you all. I then learned what it really meant to be more money driven and more, trying to accomplish things just to accomplish the result, the let's call it the financial returns, etc. So I just thought that consulting, while not so different than banking, was going to give me an extension of my education. I consider it, there's the corporate education. So I went to Wharton undergrad to get my, let's call it business education, but I learned so much just by having to work with so many incredible institutions, whether it was the banks in New York or FedEx or many other incredible companies. I actually got to work with Jamie Dimon a long time ago when I was super young at Bank, when he was at Bank One, or I was working with Fred Smith back when he was involved with FedEx. And I just learned so much so quickly and was pushed to have to take on leadership roles that I don't know what my career would be like without that consulting background, but it was definitely very positive. Now, I could have become an entrepreneur right out of school. Some of my peers are the founders of LinkedIn and the founders of incredible other companies. You could say I wasn't bold enough to do that right out of school. Maybe I should have. I don't really live in a world of regret, so I'm happy the way things worked out. But for sure, consulting was an interesting platform to build on top of.
I know a habit of yours that I've partially adopted. One time I was coming down to meet with you down in Soho, and you said, hey, I want to take a walk. And it was a beautiful day. We took a walk around Soho, and you pointed out a couple of things to me that, as an old guy trying to get a thumb on the pulse of what was going on, I wasn't aware of. One was the popularity of a brand called Supreme. And the other one that you pointed out to me as we saw a line outside a store was the secondary sneaker market. And if we hadn't taken that walk together, I would have had to wait another couple of years to learn about those two things. But that was in addition to what we chatted about on our walk. You still doing the walkabouts?
Oh, I mean, my opinion is sitting is the smoking of our generation. So it's very easy to not smoke. I think it's equally just as easy to not sit all the time. I think it's really best if we can just keep ourselves moving for longevity purposes. Now that's a word, longevity. I don't think we were using that a couple of decades ago or even a decade ago. And I just think the energy that you get from the walks is just very stimulative and very positive, and obviously gets the blood flowing. It's funny, but when we talked about Supreme and the secondary sneaker market, I ended up becoming a very early investor in GOAT, which is one of the two major platforms in that space. So it wasn't because I knew anything about expensive sneakers or because I knew anything about expensive brands like Supreme, but rather just like listening and watching what the customer does, right? You just get to learn so much by the data, whether you're listening on X or whether you're listening on Instagram or whether you're listening or watching physically in New York City in Soho where the trends are going, right? So it's valuable to help to try to predict the future.
Your first big success that everyone knows you for is Indiegogo.
Yeah, Indiegogo was my first real startup. Crazy idea. YouTube was brand new. It wasn't owned by Google yet, and it was democratizing access to content. My two co-founders and I just had an idea: if YouTube can democratize access to content, why not try to remove the gatekeeper in finance and remove the gatekeeper for access to money? So we basically tried to create YouTube for money, and that ended up becoming this concept called crowdfunding, and bred a lot of competition in a whole new market. And now it's crazy to say because now I'm the old guy. Now that's a 19-year-old industry that is taken for granted. And everybody now does crowdfunding without even thinking about it, or equity crowdfunding, or they're involved in ICOs in the crypto world.
If I recall, Slava, I remember you saying that you were too smart for yourself at the beginning of Indiegogo, and you started really investing your technology bandwidth and broadening the offerings. And you said you actually did it a disservice by making it too broad a set of offerings, that it wasn't easily identifiable enough as a place you went to raise money.
It's interesting how you positioned it. So when I was younger, and many people, we all think we're so smart, we're going to catch people in our web of perfect functionality, and they're not going to be able to get out of all the engagement. And I wasn't a good product person in those early days. And what happened was, if you asked, 10 people, what is Indiegogo about? They would give you 5 different answers because there was a bunch of different types of functionality. A year and a half in, we really had our kind of last hurrah moment because it was tough times from the market crash of 2008. And we just decided, if we're going to go down, we got to go down on our terms. And we're just trying to do funding. So we ripped out about 2/3 of all the functionality and all the capabilities and all the code that we've done, which is really 2/3 of all the work that we've done for the last 18 months. And the only button you can now press was fund. That was the only functionality that was left. And it was amazing. The combination of that and expanding our verticals from film only to then being anything, but the only action you could take was fund, really helped us to hockey stick growth, which was quite remarkable. Now, if you fast forward from that moment 6 months later and you ask those same 10 people, what do you do on Indiegogo? What is it about? They would only say one thing: that's where you fund things. And it was just so clean and so clear that was such an incredible lesson that I now have taken to all my various companies, or whether it's mentoring or advice or investing.
How is AI impacting Indiegogo?
I mean, AI is impacting everything, without a doubt. Really, at first, you're seeing that it's lowering the cost structure of things. It's really fascinating how much repetitive tasks or kind of more junior efforts that are needed from humans are now being optimized through AI. And then I think you're also seeing that it's going to advance significantly the opportunities for distribution, marketing, and revenue generation.
So you're now the prince of alts with your investments in Ambition and Vincent. And by the way, the product you put out on Vincent, every day I'm mouth open about it. It's really, really good product.
Thank you.
So being the founder of those, tell our community, when you say alts, alternative investments, what's under that umbrella?
Yeah, so the traditional way of thinking about investing for most people is 60-40-0. 60%
Yep.
public equities, 40% bonds, 0% alternative investments. We think that time has evolved, and that's really, let's call it grandpa's or grandma's way of investing. That's not really. So for us, alts is anything that is not those first two things, which is not public equities and bonds. The way we group that at Vincent, which is a platform to democratize access to alternative investments, is we really group it into 6 major buckets. This is not officially the buckets that exist in the world, but it's our way of simplifying the world into these 6 buckets, which is 1, pre-IPO venture, 2, crypto, 3, collectibles, 4, art, 5, real estate, and 6, private credit. The first 4 are more speculative and more where you hold the asset. And typically number 5 and 6 are more yield-oriented type of investing. So really the world of alternative investments is investing into any of these asset classes and of course, not being in those other two. So these days, instead of seeing 60-40-0, I really think it should be much more closer to 10 to 20% in alternatives. How you diversify in alternatives within those 6 asset classes is really up to you. I think you should be diversified across. And then the question is, how do you diversify across? How do you get access? How do you diligence? How do you do all that? And that's really what Vincent talks about all the time. That's what our newsletters try to educate about. That's where we're trying to help our audience to learn how to get exposure to all those different asset classes and how to invest accordingly.
My friend Lawrence Calcano created and has built a terrific company called iCapital, which is a small d democratization of access to the private equity world. I don't know if he's gone beyond private equity in his world, but how do you see them? Are you trying to be the iCapital of everything else?
Not exactly, but it's a way of thinking about it. iCapital is doing great work. We're really trying to help across all the asset classes. Like you said, they're focused really in PE, and PE being typically private equity. It could be type of venture, or it could be where you're kind of buying majority holdings of companies. Again, iCapital is doing good work. There's lots of evolution that's happening in the fintech world. I think it's a natural evolution of the generational shift of wealth. Younger people these days don't want to, quote unquote, only be stuck in the public markets. They're less interested in bonds. They're trying to figure out how to get exposure to all these various asset classes. And really, you're seeing more and more growth in alternative investments. And you're seeing that from the massive financial organizations, even more recently, doing significant M&A in these spaces. Even in the last few weeks and months, you're seeing Goldman Sachs buy Industry Ventures. You see EquityZen was just bought. You see Forge, which was a public company in the secondary trading, secondaries for pre-IPO companies. They just got bought as well. So there's a lot of interest in secondaries, which is just pre-IPO. And obviously there's been a lot of momentum in crypto across the financial markets. So it's really becoming much more normalized to get into alternative investments, but I still think it's very early, because if you ask the average person on the street, how much of exposure do you have right now into alternative investments? It's usually quite low, if not zero. And then the question is, how are you getting it? What kind of access do you have? How are you making the decisions? Do you have to just go through some manager? Can you direct your own money on this? Is it only in your retirement account? It's lots of interesting questions.
And I've heard from you over the years that I've been fortunate enough to know you, that you're always asking the question, what is it you'd like to be done differently, and is there a technology solution for that? I think you call it the I wish question. And when it comes to alternatives, there's a lot of I wishes there. And I'll jump to the back end question, which is, I hear a lot about tokenization. I'd love to have a better understanding of what that means, but I have an inclination that it has a big impact on your world, where you're trying to democratize access to alternative investments. Now, you mentioned one of the categories you're in is art. I had occasion a couple of weeks ago now, I guess it was, to visit Art Basel and all that goes on around it. It's a whole different world, and a whole different set of vocabulary and acronyms. But give us an example of tokenization and what that means.
Sure. So a couple of questions there. First, the I wish, just for the listeners. So many times in a conversation, you'll hear somebody say, I wish, and then there's something that follows those two words. And they say it very nonchalantly. But really where that I wish comes from is wanting something that doesn't exist. And that's a great opportunity for an entrepreneur to step in and create that reality. And
it's usually a technology.
And you could usually use the technology to fix that. Absolutely. Yep. So even if you go back to as simple as Facebook, right? Somebody was like, I wish there was a faster way to look at the different faces of the new kids in our school. And somebody figured out how to do that. Obviously, that becomes Facebook today, and then Meta, Mark Zuckerberg. But anytime that there's a conversation with the I wish, you should listen. And you really should always listen to people, what they're talking about, what they want.
Treat your sweetheart this Valentine's to gourmet gifts from Harry and David. Dazzle them with premium wines, rich chocolates, dreamy desserts, and all the tasty goodies they love most.
And your big I wish here, Slava, is we all know people say, I wish I could invest in the art world, but I really don't know how. I wish I could get into this area of crypto, but I really don't know how. Or I'd love to I'd love to own a piece of OpenAI, but it's a private company. I don't know how to get into that before it goes public. Or private credit. All we hear about in the last couple of years now is private credit. But where do I do? Do I have to lock up so much money in a big fund and wait 10 years to find out how I did? And you're trying to answer that big I wish.
Right, and that's why Vincent exists. That's why I founded that company. In terms of tokenization, so the idea of tokenization of real world assets has been around now as a conversation for a little while, ever since the layer ones like Ethereum and other protocols were starting to come out. They were saying, hey, can we use this infrastructure to be able to tokenize assets on top of that so we can fractionalize them instead of them being whole assets? So let me be more specific. So in 2017, I actually did this at Indiegogo when I helped pass the laws to do equity crowdfunding. I had a lot of these different protocols coming saying, hey, can you help raise money for our like ICO?
That little kid from Pennsylvania going down to the White House advising how to do this. That was pretty heady time for you.
It was. So yeah, we helped pass the Jobs Act in 2012 under the Obama administration, worked with SEC and FINRA for 4 years to then bring equity crowdfunding to the United States and have it go launch and live. And then what happened was various crypto companies were saying, hey, can you help us raise money legally? Because there was a lot of concern about doing things inappropriately. What then happened is people started beginning a conversation about real world assets. And the person who was main owner of the St. Regis Hotel in Aspen, Colorado, said, oh, I want to be the first person to tokenize a premium marquee real estate product, which was his hotel. So we worked with him to actually tokenize a portion of the St. Regis Hotel. So what does that mean exactly? Either you own the hotel or you sell the whole hotel. You can't own typically 5 shares of the hotel, which at the time was something like $120 million of value, right? You either sell the whole thing or not. And it's very hard to just throw in $5,000 as an investment into the hotel. So what we did is we worked with the owner to actually take about $20 million worth of hotel value, and not the whole thing, just a portion, and to actually tokenize that on the blockchain, and then to be allow that to then be traded. And that actually took a lot of effort from getting approval from the SEC, which we did. It was totally kosher. It was the first time ever that it was kosher, which was amazing. And then, it actually sold out. So we were able to, with Indiegogo, market it. And the folks from the St. Regis Hotel did a great job of dotting the I's, crossing the T's, and promoting it as well. And we sold about $20 million worth of the St. Regis Hotel via tokenized infrastructure. That still exists today. So people still have that as their shares.
What is the collective value of those then $20 million worth of tokens? What's the market cap of those 20? What was $20 million today?
I don't have that off the top of my head, so I don't know the answer to that. But this actually segues to exactly why there hasn't been a massive acceleration of these security tokens. The reason people are enjoying Bitcoin, in my opinion, or Ethereum or Solana or etc., is there's an element of volatility that is happening. And as part of that, you can ride momentum up or down. There's much less volatility in a security token like this because it's a real world asset that already has its yields and already has its value. It doesn't really move that much day by day, week by week, or even month by month. It can move over time like any other real estate asset, but it takes a significant amount of time. So it had much less liquidity and much less excitement. So then there was much less run to then create many more security tokens. But this is what people are talking about again today, which is, again, bringing real world assets onto blockchain. What's an example of that with Art Basel? So let's say you have some, Monet, some incredible piece of art, or Kusama. It actually is worth $10 million. Instead of having to find one buyer to buy it for $11 million, you could fractionalize that asset and try to sell it to, 1,100 people who all put in, their equivalent chunk of money and buy their share. Now, you could try to do this without blockchain, but the idea of having blockchain and smart contracts allows for the infrastructure and all the transaction costs to be lowered significantly. So instead of having to use a lot of humans to do compliance and checks and balances and audit, okay, who has this share at what price, it can all be built into the smart contracts, and the movement of those security tokens can move much easier. That's kind of the holy grail as to where this is all headed. I still think it's a bit early. I've seen a lot of these investments opportunities. I do think this is where we're going to end up, let's say 20 years from now. So if you and I are still talking about this in 2050, I think it's going to be super liquid, very exciting. I don't know what is going to be the catalyst that everybody jumps on board onto real world assets that are getting tokenized. I think it's going to be a slow journey. I think the bigger companies are going to have to somehow put their top fund and their top assets onto tokenization, which obviously they're going to need to move from their legacy systems, which there's going to be a cost trade-off there as to what's the benefit, cost benefit there. So I do think it's going to take a little bit of time.
What your portfolio looks like, instead of 60, 40, 0, what's your portfolio mix?
I am completely inappropriately into alternative investments, not investment advice whatsoever, but I'm probably closer to 20-0-80. So I do like the public markets. I do love the liquidity of the public markets. I do love the, let's call it, the compliance of the public markets. I'm not into bonds. I'm not really into a lot of yield-oriented assets, meaning like real estate and private credit. And I do love all the other speculative assets and where you hold onto the asset, whether it's pre-IPO, crypto, art, and collectibles.
And if you would, tell me about Ambition.
Yeah, I mean, Ambition is really my primary focus these days. Definitely a founder of multiple other companies, including Vincent. But I somehow stumbled into becoming a VC. It wasn't on purpose.
All right, so stepping back, looking at the bigger picture, which I like to do with you, is to I work every day to get smarter about how to use AI technologies, how to guess at how it's going to change the things we do, and it's tough to keep up with. But then I wonder, when you get into the physical AI world, that being robotics, give me some sense of things that you see that you're still going, wow, that's interesting.
Oh, I mean, that's happening now every single day.
I'm sure it is.
I mean, I think we're living in a very exciting time. It's only faster than ever, and I think it's only speeding up. And I don't know if it was Bill Gates or who said this, but the things that you think will take a long time happen much faster, and the things that you think will take a short time take a little bit longer. So people think that these AI robotics types things are not going to be here anytime soon. I think they are going to be here soon-ish. I think, as a simple concept, by 2030, if you can afford a $100,000 car, which not everybody can, that's an expensive car. But if you can afford a $100,000 car and are the type that would buy one, you probably will have your own personal robot in your house, as your assistant.
And what is that personal robot doing for you?
I would start with, what is your assistant at home helping you do? Are they?
Don't talk about my wife like that.
I didn't say that. So are they cleaning your dishes? Are they doing the laundry? Are they taking the dog for a walk? Are they reading a book to your kid? Are they doing the yard work? Are they doing the cooking or not? Again, maybe some assistants, it's a little bit more subtle to be able to do the cooking, so you don't give them that. I think the robot's going to be the same. It might be a little bit too subtle to give the robot the cooking. But I do think that a lot of these more basic things are definitely going to be handled by a robot. Again, I don't think it's going to be mainstream. I don't think it's going to be $5,000 robots that everybody and their mother has one. I do think that's where we're headed probably in 25 years as opposed to in 5 years. But I do think that early adoption is happening. Just an example from Ambition. So we were lucky enough to invest in Chef Robotics, about, I can't remember, like 5-6 years ago. And when we invested, everybody said it was the dumbest investment ever because, hardware is hard. That was the phrase. And investing in robotics is just stupid. Now, fast forward, obviously that seems like a genius investment, but this was actually my intern at Indiegogo. And what he's doing is he's augmenting food manufacturing the way Elon Musk has augmented car manufacturing. So really taking out a lot of the humans out of the car manufacturing, which is what, Elon has done. So Rajat, the CEO here, is removing a lot of the humans from doing really difficult, horrible jobs of having to cut the carrots in really cold temperatures in these factories to add the carrots into these frozen meals, etc. So this is really getting removed. Carrots is just an example, right? It could be broccoli, it could be rice, it could be whatever. And he's created a robotic system to be able to remove the humans. And now they've created tens of millions of meals through their robotics infrastructure, which is quite incredible. Fast forward to today, everybody thinks it's a genius example and a genius idea. He was just selected as one of the top 50 most promising companies from the information, which is incredible. But again, you had to be quite contrarian 5-6 years ago. So you have to be thinking about things that not everybody is already thinking about, because it's hard to be making money and buy low, if everybody's saying the exact same thing as you. I do think that robotics and AI are going to be revolutionary.
Yeah, you figure the bottleneck in kitchens and restaurants is that no one says, "Oh, I have too many people applying for jobs to work in my kitchen." And if you can do, especially you mentioned the carrots, if you can do that in a cold environment that you don't want to subject a human to, then you can keep the food chain cleaner, fresher, colder, and last.
And you don't have to recruit the person, you don't have to train the person, you don't have to deal with their sick days, you don't have to deal with them actually being sick at work, you don't have to deal with the mistake that they put the gluten product into the gluten-free line. So there's a lot of benefits to the transition to robotics, in my opinion. And I think we're going to be seeing that happen quite a bit in this coming decade.
So it leads me to a couple of questions, AI related, Slava. One is a friend of mine who I turn to for advice in the world, like I do you, is telling me about I was not digitally native. My kids were digitally native. My grandkids are not AI native, but there are AI native companies and people coming along now. When they look at a business problem, it's going to be very different than even a young Turk like you, because when they approach the "I wish" question that you frame, their thought about solutions are going to be different than the digitally native person. They're AI native. How do you think that changes the invention curve?
Completely agree. So I graduated in 2000. I consider myself very native to Google. I'm very Google native. So it's funny we call that digital because obviously everything is digital now. So I would consider myself very, very search native. And I'm having to train myself to be, let's call it AI first, right? So today, Google superficially is really a search engine. They're trying to layer in their AI capabilities into their search engine. So it's as if you have AI right away as part of search. That's not officially true yet. So I think that's transitioning there. I think the younger people, they don't even think of search first, right? They think of AI first. And I'm finding myself transitioning to that same exact way. So I have been telling my wife, like, you don't have to ask me first, ask AI first. Okay. Yes. And a perfect example of this is we actually had an electric wire in our neighborhood that came down right next to our driveway. There wasn't any problem immediately noticeable. And she said, "Slava, please take care of this." And I said, "Why don't you take care of it?" And she said, "I don't know how to take care of it. A lot of these home things, you're much better at figuring out, the answers quicker and how to access to get to the answer." And I said, "Just ask AI and see where it gets you. And if you can't get to the solution via AI, just let me know." No joke. Within 24 hours, she already had it all figured out and the solution already in place. The net of it was she took a photo of the wire at the home, uploaded it to AI. AI said it's probably either this or this, which was either a cable wire or a utility electricity wire. It was a cable wire. And if it's a cable wire, you should check with the cable company. If it's a utility wire, you should check with the utility company. If you're not sure and you're concerned, call the police. They will. Don't call via 911, call via 311. They'll check up on you and help you, guide you on this. They might even have a suggestion as what to do. She did call the police. It wasn't any sort of alarm. They came within an hour. They told her it's a cable wire, and then they helped to follow up.
Celebrate love
with 1-800-Flowers.com.
We were 11 years old when we met.
She didn't like me at all.
We played tennis together, and I told him that I was pretty good, and I wasn't.
She makes me want to be a better person.
Oh, these are cute.
Celebrate your love with 1-800-Flowers.com.
I know here at the Flowers Company, just to give a shout out to our CEO, Adolfo Villagomez, he's walking the walk, and someone comes to him and said, with a question. They say, he'll ask them, well, how have you interacted with Copilot or ChatGPT to answer that question for yourself, and what alternatives did you come up with? And if they say, well, I really haven't, they said, well, why don't you do that before you bring that to me?
Yeah, exactly. And even as part of vacation planning, my own son said, hey, did you check with AI to figure out what itinerary you suggest for us? And did you make sure that you ask for it to be kid friendly? So it's a great example. And he's exactly right. It's 100% correct. I actually do love using AI for being a travel agent type of recommendation as a sounding board.
So then there's a bunch of kids who are caught in a squat. So older than your kids by a decade, more than a decade. Young person just graduating from school. I know a dozen that come to mind right away who are having a very difficult time finding their way into the job market, Slava. They didn't take AI in school because it wasn't offered. They're having a hard time getting the first interview. What advice do you have for them?
I don't think that's an AI thing personally. I think it's hard to get an entry job, period. I think it was hard when I graduated. There was a lot of people that struggled. I think you need to be entrepreneurial with your ways, be open-minded, and just get your foot in the door. From there, it's about action and execution and just doing the work. So I think too many people are looking for, quote unquote, the right job, the right salary, the right brand, the right logo, the right man. It's too many check boxes on their list.
But their education hasn't served them efficiently and time-wise to have them properly prepared for the world we're in today. How do they catch up on their own? What advice do you have for them? How they can catch up?
I mean, look, can you try to upskill yourself by learning more about AI and trying to?
There's so many courses available on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. I mean, you could even work with AI to train you in AI, right? You could ask it.
You can say, okay, ChatGPT, how do I learn how to use you better?
Exactly. And you could even say, hey, give me a curriculum where I have to do a 30-minute actual project every single day for the next 30 days. And you can go through that exercise and have it do it with you. That's not the question. The question is, will you put in the effort to do that, right? And then combine that with you having to have the hustle to find the job that gets you into the world. My opinion is getting your first job is your first job. But after that, you already have a job. And then people always ask, how was he, she at that job? And you can then get promoted or you can have references. So it's really a matter of getting your foot in the door, whatever it is. I think if the option is between wait for perfect or just take what you can get right here, I would always go with take what you can get in front of you because you can really parlay that to be much better. Perfection can be the enemy of very good or even just good.
It's always a treat to chat with you, Slava, in any circumstance. You're such an interesting and thoughtful guy and a nice guy. And I think back, you referenced the fact that you and I had a personal connection vis-a-vis COVID. We had breakfast together with a small group the morning that COVID really hit New York. And you said to me, no, I think this is going to be much bigger than everyone thinks. And your source of information at that time, what was the name of the game you used to play, Virus?
No. I mean, I was on Twitter a lot at the time.
But there was some game you played about how viruses spread.
Well, I was tracking the formulas of how they spread, but yeah.
So you were awfully prescient in terms of how big it was going to be and how it was going to impact us. And I think about that all the time.
Yeah, I mean, the saddest thing that I said that was accurate was I'm concerned that grandkids are going to kill the grandparents, because of the contact and, that elderly might be more exposed and, concerned about it. But yeah, it was definitely pretty bad. I started tracking it in December before COVID happened. I remember I told my wife, I'm like, when the schools close, we're going to leave the next day out of New York City. I remember she laughed at me many times. She's like, New York City schools? And I said, yeah, when New York City, schools close, we're going to leave the city the next day. She said, New York City schools can never close. I'm like, well, I don't think they're going to close, but I think there's a chance. She's like, because there's all the parents. Where are they going to go? And I said, yeah, no, I understand. But when the schools close, the next day we're going to leave. And that's exactly what happened.
Well, you were prescient then, and I think you're prescient now about the role of alts. And if someone wants to check on how things are going with Vincent, how things are going with Ambition or Indiegogo, where do they go to find out?
Yeah, so lots of different URLs. So Ambition is www.ambition.com. Vincent is withvincent.com. Indiegogo is indiegogo.com. And to keep it easy for anybody, I'll just let them know. My email is just slava@ambition.com. I'm pretty responsive. That doesn't always mean I say yes to giving you money, but I am pretty responsive.
Slava, thanks so much. We get to connect again
Absolutely.
soon.
I'll walk and talk in our future.
Thanks, pal.